We're picking up in chapter 24, and we're beginning in verse 16. And you'll remember that David and Saul had just had an encounter, and David chose not to touch the Lord's anointed. He had an opportunity to kill him. And here he is speaking to Saul, and he has been so gracious to Saul from my perspective, and just basically asked him, why are you seeking to kill me? Who am I? Just somebody so insignificant. And in verse 16, and it came to pass, when David made an end of speaking these words unto Saul, that Saul said, Is this thy voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept.
Yeah, it's interesting how he's all of a sudden had a change of heart, almost schizophrenic here, you understand. One minute he's wanting to kill him, and then then he responds, Is this your voice, my son David? I mean, he is the son-in-law to the king,
right,
before the king gave his wife away. Okay? And it says Saul began to weep. And, I think he went back and forth. He knew David was a good man. There was nothing in David's life to convince him otherwise. All David had ever done was good. And so this reality's setting in, and now this is really amplified. You could have killed me and you didn't. You're a better man than I am, is the essence of it. And he begins to weep, okay?
And he said to David, Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil.
So he's coming clean, isn't he? You've done me good. I've done you evil. You're more righteous than I am.
Right. And thou hast showed this day how thou hast dealt well with me, for as much as when the Lord hath delivered me into thy hand, thou killest me not.
So I've seen your kindness demonstrated to me today. You could have killed me. And you didn't. Now, here again, it's interesting. He said, the Lord delivered you into my hand. And you did me good, not evil. You think about what Jesus says in his, what we commonly call the Sermon on the Mount. Do good to your enemy.
Right.
Bless them. You understand? Those that persecute you, you don't take vengeance in your own hands.
For if a man finds his enemy, will he not let go well away? Wherefore the Lord reward thee good, for thou hast done unto me this day.
So Saul, obviously he's realizing the purity of David's heart, and he says, if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go? You know what that's saying? I see that I'm not your enemy. I've made you mine, but you never made me your enemy. And he said, if a man finds his enemy, he's not going to just let him go safely away. So the Lord reward you good for what you've done to me this day.
David's actions spoke louder than any words he ever could have said, didn't they? And now behold, I know well that thou shalt surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in thine hand.
So Saul admits what he's felt in his heart all along. So he just openly admits to David, I know that you're going to be king of Israel. I know that.
Swear now therefore unto me by the Lord, that thou wilt not cut off my seed after me, and that thou wilt not destroy my name out of my father's house.
So Saul is making a request of David. I know that you're going to be king. I want you to swear to me that you won't kill my descendants, that you won't wipe my name out. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And David sware unto Saul, and Saul went home, and David told his men, gat them up unto the hold.
So David honors his request. Yeah, I'll swear to you, I'm not going to cut off your descendants. I'm not vindictive is the essence of it. And so Saul takes him at his word. Saul leaves and goes home, and David and his men, they go back to the stronghold, you understand?
Yeah. Chapter 25. And Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him, and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran.
So Samuel, who has been the last judge of Israel, and a prophet, obviously, the one who's anointed both Saul and David. Samuel's in his latter years, obviously, when he dies, and Israel gathers together to mourn for him. Because Samuel had a tremendous reputation among the nation of Israel, and he was a man that obviously with whom God spoke through and spoke to the nation through. And he was a man of absolute integrity. And so they came together and mourned his death and buried him in his hometown there in Ramah. And then David left for the wilderness of Paran.
To me, this is significant. When we had read through the Pentateuch, as silly as this may sound to y'all, when we read about Moses dying, my heart just kind of, oh. And I think the same thing with Samuel. Here's why. Do you remember what was spoken over Samuel in chapter 3 and verse 19? Do you remember how it said that Samuel grew and the Lord was with him and did not let none of his words fall to the ground? In other words, this man who acted as a spokesman for God, this man of God, what he said came to pass. Now, how could that be? Because what he said, he was inspired by God to say. And God watches over his word and sees that that word comes to pass. And so any time when you have a man of God or a woman of God who leaves this earth, it makes a tremendous impact on the people that this person has had influence over. And so those three little words that's a big deal. Samuel is a man that is missed, and we're going to find out Saul tries to bring him back. He needs counsel. The other thing I want to point out here is it helps if we have an idea and try to put some pieces together about where things are located and where we've heard these names before. But you'll remember about Paran. When we read in Genesis in chapter 21 with Ishmael, remember how he went and dwelt, he was an archer, he went and dwelt in the wilderness of Paran. So this is where David went. In verse 2, and there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel.
Okay. He's a wealthy man, obviously. Mm-hmm. Okay. 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats. And he was shearing his sheep in Carmel where he had conducted business. And his name was Nabal. His wife's name was Abigail. Mm-hmm. I'm ahead of you, right?
That's okay. I'll catch up with you.
It's okay. Abigail was a beautiful and intelligent woman. Mm-hmm. And Nabal, who was a descendant of Caleb, of the tribe of Judah, you understand, was an unmerciful man and evil in his transactions. Now, that's a combination. Mm-hmm. Here you've got the bad guy married to the great woman. Mm-hmm. But you understand, prearranged marriages was often negotiated by the parents, and the woman didn't have a whole lot to do with it, you understand?
Yeah. So this man, Nabal, as Pete said, in verse 3 it says, let me just read it to you. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and of beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. So that word churlish is only used this one time in the scriptures to describe this one man, Nabal. He was a severe man. We're going to find out that he was a man that you couldn't even talk to. Mm-hmm. Nobody could even talk to him. But Abigail, on the other hand, was intelligent. She was beautiful. And her name, if you look up her name, it means father or source of joy. This lady brought joy where she went. She brought joy. And we're going to see that she brings joy to David. But she turns around in a pretty bad situation. Now, there's something important I want you to see here. As Pete said, that Nabal was of the house of Caleb. Do you remember who Caleb is? Caleb was the one, you remember who he's most often identified with? Joshua, right? Joshua and Caleb. One of the two spies that had brought back the good report. He was described as having a different spirit, right? He was of a different spirit. We read that in Genesis. So what's interesting about this is Nabal came from a heritage, if you will, that was of a good spiritual heritage. Now, we've read about some other people who came from heritages, didn't we? Like, do you remember reading about Ruth? What was her heritage? She was a Moabitess, right? They weren't even to be in the congregation of the Lord for 10 generations, right? But do you remember what Ruth did? She submitted her heart to Naomi, and she said, your people will be my people, your God, my God. She made these wise choices, didn't she? She made good choices. And a woman who should not, because of her heritage, end up in the lineage of Jesus, did so because of her heart. Now, Nabal did not make good choices. He had this spiritual heritage, but we're going to find he was not a godly man. And the decisions he made were very poor decisions and impacted their entire family negatively. But you think about, we had just read about Samuel dying. Samuel, do you know that he was from the lineage of the Kohathites? We're going to read that in 1 Chronicles when we get to the 6th chapter there. And he was of the lineage of Korah. Do you remember Korah? Korah was the one that rebelled against Moses, right? But Samuel's lineage didn't impact him, did it? Here's what I want you to see in that. It's not where you come from. It's where you go to. So our past doesn't have to define us. When we look to Jesus and when we accept Jesus, we become new creations in Christ, don't we? The old passed away. It's gone. And that old, we're supposed to just let it die and be buried, aren't we? We don't have to let that old be resurrected and define us, do we? And so I see hope in this, but we're going to find out that Nabal, he just was not a godly man. And Abigail was a godly woman.
Let's say this, if you don't want your past to hold you back, let go of your past.
Right.
And I'm going to make a correction here to protect Heather, okay?
Thank you.
Because somebody may come up with something. You'll find that Caleb had, where it says he had a different spirit, you find that in Numbers.
Oh, okay, thank you.
He didn't exist there in Genesis.
He didn't.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, very good.
Just a protection. Okay.
I appreciate all the help I can get, don't y'all? Verse 4. And David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep.
So David gets word. Now, how does he get word? We'll find out later on, because of Nabal's shepherds and all being out there with David and his men. So David gets word that Nabal's shearing his sheep. So he sends 10 men to greet Nabal in his name. Mm-hmm. You go down and greet Nabal in the name of David, okay?
Yeah, that's important. Who is David's name? In my name, who is he? He's the son-in-law of the king. He is in a position of high military standing. He's one that should be respected. He's the one that killed Goliath. Saul killed his thousands. David killed his 10,000s.
And he's of the tribe of Judah.
That's right.
So is Nabal.
And thus shall ye say to him that liveth in prosperity, Peace both to thee, and peace be to thine house, and peace be unto all that thou hast.
So when David hears that Nabal's shearing sheep, and he sent these 10 men to him, he instructed them, you inform Nabal, he said, use my name, okay, and just let him know that we were a wall to his men. They didn't lose any of their flock while we were there. We were actually an asset to them. And he says, just ask your servants; they'll attest to that fact. Okay.
Look at how many times he says peace. 3 times he says peace. So the message here is he's coming in peace. This is a man, he's humbling himself because we're going to find he needs something. He needs a little help here.
Another thing to take in consideration is David's men didn't steal any of his sheep and goats. You understand?
Yeah, that's right. And now I have heard that thou hast shearers. Now thy shepherds which were with us, we hurt them not, neither was there aught missing unto them, all the while they were in Carmel.
Go ahead and read it next.
Ask thy young men, they will show thee. Wherefore let the young men find favor in thy eyes, for we come in a good day. Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh to thy hand unto thy servants and to thy son David.
And so he has these men, obviously they're speaking in the name of David, talking to Nabal, and they say, this is a good time for us to come. Why? You're shearing sheep. You know, we took care of your guys, your flocks and all that, and you can ask your servants, and they can attest to this fact. Now, what we would like for you to do is return the favor to us by sharing some food with us. And so these servants make that request to Nabal.
Here again, you see David refers to himself as your son, to thy son. So he's taken a position of humility. And do you remember how many sheep Nabal has? 3,000. So I wonder if he could spare a few. And when David's young men came, they spake to Nabal according to all those words in the name of David, and ceased.
Agreed.
And Nabal answered David's servants and said, Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Shall I take my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed for my shears, and give it unto men whom I know not whence they be?
So David's men have gone to Nabal. They convey this message, but they were treated with contempt. And Nabal, just to show you the type person he was, responded to the request by saying, Who is David? Who's the son of Jesse? It's not that he doesn't know who David is. He does know who he is. And this next statement that he makes reveals that he does know who he is. Mm-hmm. When he says there are many servants who nowadays break away each one from his master. So he's accusing David of deserting Saul.
Yeah.
You understand? He knows about David. He knows David is running from the king. He knows Saul's trying to kill David, and he's not going to favor David at all. And then if you look at the questions he asked and look at the personal pronouns, shall I take my bread, my water, my meat that I have killed for my shearers, and give it to men to whom I do not know where they're from? So what's the answer? No. I'm not giving you anything. That's bottom line, okay?
Mm-hmm. So David's young men turned their way and went again and came and told him all those sayings.
So after hearing Nabal's response, the 10 men, they return to David and they tell him how Nabal responded to them.
And David said unto his men, Gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the stuff.
So David is obviously upset with the response. And so he tells his men, all right, arm yourself, get your weapons on. And he and 400 men started to Carmel. Note, David put his weapons on too, right? Mm-hmm. And he left 200 people staying by the supplies, okay? But yeah. David has evil intent in mind.
Yeah.
How dare you respond to me like that?
One of the things we were talking about in the office today was all the experiences that David had prior to becoming king, and how he had to deal with so many different things. And I can't help but think about our last conversation in class, how we talked about how important training is. But David had people that came up against him with weapons, didn't he? You think about the challenge that he had with Goliath and his sword. You think about the challenges that he had with Saul and his spear. And then you think about, on the flip side of that, Jonathan. Do you remember what Jonathan did with his weapons? Jonathan gave his weapons to David out of friendship, out of love, and they had a covenant based off of love. And then David dealt with all kinds of words, didn't he? People talking to him in all kinds of manner of ways. We have Nabal here making false accusations against him and being just downright ugly. Who are you? What about Saul? And how Saul would talk to David? What kind of words would he say? On one hand, he would call him his son and say he loved him. And then on the other hand, he'd talk about wanting to kill him. sending people out to kill him. But what kind of words did David hear from Jonathan? He heard words of friendship. He heard words of love. He heard words of encouragement. I know who you are. I know that you're going to be king. You're not going to die. I'm going to be right there with you. And we're going to find out that the words he hears from Abigail in this moment are words that will turn around the situation, and they're going to be exactly what his soul needs to hear. Verse 14. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them.
Now, I want you to look at the contrast here between Nabal and Abigail. One of Nabal's servants goes to Abigail and tells her what's happened and how rude Nabal has been to David's men. Now, this tells me something about Abigail. Mm-hmm. Number one, that servant knows that she is a woman of good understanding. He knows that she's a woman that will listen to him. And so if otherwise you would look at the risk involved, how she could run and tell Nabal, hey, your servant has undermined you. But this servant goes to Abigail, and he is very concerned because he's a smart man, and he knows that when David's men left, that they didn't leave with a very gracious goodbye. That they were going to be coming back, and it was going to be bad news for Abigail's whole household. And so this servant goes to Abigail and tells her what's happened, how rude Nabal has been. And he tells her how good David and his men have been to them, that none of them were hurt, none of them had lost anything, while David's men were with them. And he just said, David's men, they were like a wall to us day and night while we were with them tending flocks. In other words, David did us nothing but good. And now my master is wanting to do them evil. He's not wanting to do good by them. He's not wanting to return the favor, if you will. And I'm ahead of you, so go ahead and catch up with me here.
Well, I'll just pick up with verse 17. Now, therefore, know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him.
Now, look at that. This servant can talk to Abigail, but he can't talk to Nabal. And so he goes to Abigail, and he's actually exhorting her, how about you using your wisdom? You're a wise woman. And this is a situation. If something's not done, we're in trouble. He stands to be killed. The servant himself stands to be killed. And he knew that David and his men were very capable of doing that very thing. I mean, these are warriors here. And so use your wisdom, because David is getting ready to retaliate. And so we need to do something. He said, your husband is so wicked and foolish that no one can talk to him. Isn't that something?
Yeah, it is.
So he has a lot of confidence in her to be able to open up and bare his heart to her in this manner. And he's revealing why he came to talk to Abigail instead of talking with Nabal. Nabal was so foolish and so cruel that he wouldn't take counsel. Yet Abigail was a woman of wisdom and who knew what to do with counsel. Think about that. The servant is going to her with some counsel. We're about to get killed. He couldn't tell that to Nabal, but he can tell it to her. Now, I want to hear your counsel. What what are we going to do about this to prevent this?
She was put in a position where she had a position of leadership. And I think about how many times it's been said here how the Lord puts the responsibility on the mature one. And Abigail was certainly mature. Remember, she was described as having good understanding, intelligence. This woman acts with wisdom. And we're going to see that the wisdom comes from the Lord. It's God who sends her and directs her step. If I may.
Go ahead.
Let's turn, please, to Proverbs chapter 3. Look at verse 25, please, and see if this doesn't sound familiar, the situation that Abigail and her household are in. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. Now, Abigail was in a position that could have caused her sudden fear. Her servant comes and she says, evil's determined. Pretty much, something's going to happen and it's not going to be good. What are you going to do about that? What could Abigail have done in that situation? She could have cried. She could have run to her foolish husband. She could have lied. She could have contrived a story. She could have gone and talked to other people about the situation. But what did she do? We're going to find out here in a minute. Let's keep looking at Proverbs. It says, for the Lord shall be thy confidence and shall keep thy foot from being taken. We're going to see, I believe that Abigail's confidence comes from the Lord. She knows who she is. She knows that the Lord liveth. She proclaims that. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thy hand to do it. Is that what Nabal was doing? Was he withholding good? Was it in his power to help David and his men with some food? Of course it was. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and till morrow I will give thee, when thou hast it by thee. Devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. Nabal surely was being evil-minded against David, who was right there doing nothing, he and his men doing nothing but good to protect not only Nabal's men, but also their flock. He acted as a wall, a protection. Strive not with the man without a cause, if he hath done thee no harm. Is that what Nabal was doing with David? You see, this is wisdom speaking here in this proverb. Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. For the forward is an abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. His secret counsel is with the upright, is how the New King James reads that. The curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. You know, that word habitation is actually home. There's a difference between a house, a dwelling place, and a home where you can rest. And you think about Abigail's dwelling place. Her house was with a man nobody could speak to, with a man who was so severe he was foolish in his ways. And then you have this woman who's beautiful, intelligent. We're going to find out that she believes in the Lord and she's moved by the Lord. Her home, she had to find her home. in God. We have to find our home, our resting place in Jesus. Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. And we're going to see what happens to Nabal, because things don't turn out well with him. But I want you to think about this proverb that we've just read, the situation that Abigail's in, and now watch how she acts with the wisdom of God to handle this matter. She's in the position where she has to know and consider what she's going to do about this matter. And look in verse 18 what she does. Then Abigail made haste. There comes a time in our lives when we don't have time to prepare. We have to be prepared. We have to live in a state of preparation, if you will. We had a situation just the other night come up, and a comment was made, and the response that was given to that comment is, that's where we have to be prepared. We have to prepare. But Abigail made haste. She was prepared. Look at what this woman did. She took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses.
So Abigail acted immediately. Mm-hmm. You understand? She took positive action to try to prevent any harm that was intended for her family. She's following the advice of the servant, you understand? And so she takes this food. That's what David was asking for. He's asking for food for his men. And so she blesses him abundantly, you understand, with this food, and goes on her way and tells her servants, you go ahead, and she followed, but she didn't tell Nabal what she was doing. And there's a reason for that, because he's not in a position, he's drunk. You don't tell a drunk what you're doing, okay? Now, our time's up, so we're going to stop here. We'll pick back up with this in our next session. We'll probably come right back up to that 18th verse or whatever. Father, I thank you that you bless us indeed, you enlarge our territory. Your hands with us to keep us from evil so that we do not cause pain. You bless us and keep us. You make your face to shine upon us. You're gracious unto us. You lift up your countenance upon us and you give us peace. So, Lord, we invite you to rise up. Let your enemies be scattered and those who hate you flee before you. Amen.
Amen.
You guys have a great rest of the week.